Okay, so let's suppose I had this equation right here. And let's suppose the equation looked like this. And so that's easy to actually do in your head because that's a very simple linear equation. So 3 times what is 6? 2, right? Okay? So 3 times 2 is 6. All right, what if you had this? We had x times x plus 1 equals 0. Well, if you distribute, here's the problem when you distribute. If you distribute, you're going to get x squared plus x, right? Equals 0. So if you were to distribute, you get x squared plus x equals 0. And you don't know how to solve a quadratic that looks like that. You all you were doing at this point was solving a linear equation, or last semester you also solved linear inequalities. But now when you distribute, you end up with a quadratic equation. So notice this whole thing though is a quadratic equation. So now we're going to solve quadratic equations. That's what we're doing now. In this section, the way that you're going to solve a quadratic equation is by factoring. So you're going to solve this quadratic equation, by factoring. Now you remember though, can every polynomial be factored? No, because you saw that on some of those you have to write what word? Prime. So not all of these quadratic equations are factorable, but in this section they are. If they're not, you have to use, and you may remember this, the quadratic formula, but that's in another section. That's towards the end of the course when we come back to the quadratic formula. But here we're going to solve these by factoring. Okay, let's go back to this one right here. So some of you said to go ahead and distribute. Okay, so you distribute it. It's a quadratic equation. I'm going to solve this quadratic equation by what method? I'm going to solve this quadratic equation by what method? Factoring. So how do you factor the left-hand side? What's the GCF? X. So it's x times what? Equals 0, which is what you had here, right? Okay, so you're kind of going backwards whenever you do that. Okay, so here's the idea. How many factors do you see here? How many things are being multiplied together?
One.
Nope. Two. The first one is x, and what's the other one? X plus 1. Those are my factors. So remember, these are factors. So the factors of this quadratic equation right here is x and x plus 1. What do you notice about their product? Product is 0. Well, if you have two numbers whose product is 0, then one of them better be what? 0. Right? 5 times what is 0? 0. 8 times what is 0? 0. So if I have two or more factors whose product is 0, then one of them must be 0. So what we do is we set each of those equal to 0. So what's this factor right here? What is this factor? The time of the factor. X, I got to set it equal to what? 0. What is this factor right here? I got to set it equal to what? 0. So notice I went from a quadratic equation to two linear equations. These are linear equations right here. And now we solve the linear equations. So we get x by itself. Notice here, though, x is already by itself, so what's my solution? 0 is a solution. Over here, how do I get x by itself? So what's your solution? So there are your two solutions. And you can always check. Let's check this. Let's go back to the original. And where we see the variable x, I'm going to plug in 0. 0 squared plus 0, is that equal to 0? You said no? Oh, yeah, it is, right? Okay. Now let's check -1. -1 in parentheses squared plus the -1, is that equal to 0? First of all, what's -1 squared? What's 1 plus the -1? 0. So that's true. So those are your two solutions. So here's the idea. Whenever you solve a quadratic equation by factoring, you see when we set each of those equal to 0? You remember we said this right here, we set them equal to 0, right? That's called the zero factor property. So the zero factor property says this. If you have two or more factors, two or more, I'm just going to use 2 here, a times b, and their product is 0, then one of those has to be what? 0. So either a is 0 or what? B is 0. So the zero factor property. Now remember though, this property only works if what number's on the other side? 0. So soon you're going to see a case where 0 is not on the other side, so you need to be careful. But it only applies if 0 is on the other side. Okay? All right, now here's the ideas. So let's look at, it's very simple, so don't make this difficult. The only reason why it would be difficult for you is if you don't know how to factor. That's what will make it difficult for you, is not knowing how to factor. Okay, so this is number 4 on page 1006. Watch how simple this is. And this is section 13.6. Okay, so you have x plus 4 times x minus 10 equal 0. I'm going to ask you this. What kind of equation is this? Is this, we've only done 2 types, linear and quadratic. Is this linear or quadratic? It's quadratic, because if I follow this out, what's x times x? X squared. So a quadratic equation, remember you graphed the quadratic function, that parabola? Okay, so this is an equation, though. It's not a function, it's an equation. So a quadratic equation has this form. Ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. That's the form of a quadratic equation. So if I follow this out, that's what that would look like. So in this section, though, in section 13.6, to solve these quadratic equations, you're going to use what property? Zero factor property. In order to use the zero factor property, the left side has to be factored. Well, what do you notice about the left side? It's already factored. So how many factors do you see? 2. Their product is 0, meaning that one of them has to be what? 0. So we say each one equal to 0. So tell me what the next step is. X plus 4 equals 0, and then what? X minus 10 equals 0. So notice I went from a quadratic to 2 linear. So what's this solution? What's this one? X equals 10. All right. And you can always check yourself. Let's check 10. All right, so let's check 10. So where we see the variable x, I'll plug in 10. What's 10 plus 4? What's 10 minus 10? Is that product equal to 0? Yes. Let's check -4. What's negative 4 plus 4? What's negative 4 and a negative 10? Negative 14, right? Is that product equal to 0? Yes. So there's your two solutions. Okay? All right, number 10. You have 2x times x plus 12 equals 0. Now, in number 4, let's look up at number 4. Some of you didn't notice at first that number 4 was a quadratic equation. But then we saw that if we FOIL it, it would be a quadratic equation. What about number 10? How can you tell that is a quadratic equation? I can't use a FOIL method, distributive property. So what's 2x times x? 2x squared. So it's quadratic. That x squared makes it quadratic. All right, but you don't want to FOIL it. I'm sorry, you don't distribute because it's already in what form? Factored form. This is already in factored form. It's already factored. So then you want to take each factor and set it equal to 0. So tell me what your factors are. Okay, you can leave it as 2x, although 2 is one, x is another one. But you can put 2x together. Most students do. Although there are 3 factors, though. 2 times, what's the other one? X times, what's the other one? X plus 12. There are actually 3 factors. But if you want to put the 2x together, you can. So you'd say 2x equal what? 0. And then x plus 12 equal what? 0. So how to get x by itself over here, though? Divide by 2. So what's one of your solutions? 0. Over here, what's the other one? Negative 12. So here's your two solutions. All right, now let's look at 20. X squared plus 2x minus 63 equals 0. X squared plus 2x minus 63 equals 0. What kind of equation is this?
Linear.
Oh, good Lord, girl. Quadratic. That x squared. If the x squared wasn't there, then it would be what? Linear. So it's quadratic. But is it in factored form? No. So you got to factor this. In order to be able to use that zero factor property, it has to be in factored form. So what's your GCF? 1. So then you go directly, and remember there are 3 terms, you're going to do the 2 binomials. Okay, so tell me how to factor this. What times itself twice is x squared?
X.
X and x. What times itself, not what times itself, but give me 2 numbers whose product is 63. You want to try 9 and 7? And 9 and 7 would work because of that 2. All right, now remember the last sign's negative. So the signs in here have to be different. One's positive, one's negative. Which one do you think is positive? 9's positive, 7 is negative. All right. So the first thing you have to do is factor. Now, once it's factored, I can use what property? Zero factor property. So what properties do I say? What factors do I set equal to 0? X plus 9 equals 0, and then what? Equals 0. So what's x here? Negative 9. What's x here? Positive 7. So there's your 2 solutions. You can check them. Remember, when you check them, you always go back to the original. The original was this quadratic equation. So you have access to a calculator. So you go check into the original, though, because you could have easily messed up when you factored. So always go back to the original. So where you see the variable x, you're going to plug in negative 9. So I got negative 9 in parentheses squared plus 2 times negative 9 minus 63, and we'll see if that's going to equal 0. What's negative 9 times itself? What's 2 times negative 9? and then minus 63. On your calculator, what you just quickly, what's 81 minus 18 minus 63? 0. So that's a true statement. So negative 9 is the solution. Then you can do the same thing with negative 7. Now in attention, I have time to do that. On a worksheet you do. But if you do the same thing with 7, so we see the variable x, you're going to plug in 7. So I get 7 squared plus 2 times 7 minus 63. And we'll see that's equal to 0. What's 7 squared? 2 times 7? All right, so 49 plus 40 plus 14 is 63. Minus 63 is 0. Okay? All right, let's look at this one. This is going to be 30, and then I'll let you work with those worksheets. Okay, so this is 30. So we're not finished with this section. We'll finish it next time. All right, now listen carefully to this and listen to the words, and you may know what to do. So here's number 30. What do you think you may want to do?
Subtract 24.
All right. So remember, whenever we use a zero factor property, what was on the other side? 0. So I have to have 0 on the other side. Before you factor, 0 has to be on the other side. That's the only way I can use zero factor property. So when I mention this quadratic equation right here, see ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, let's call this standard form. So standard form. So first of all, we'll make sure it's in standard form and make sure it's in descending order. So to put this in standard form, I got to subtract 24 from both sides. And let's put it in descending order. So it's going to be the left side equal 0. Now you can factor. So what do you think your two factors are?
X.
24. What do you want to try? 8 and 3. 8 is going to be what? Negative. 3 is going to be positive. All right. So those are your steps. So you put in standard form. It's in descending order. You factored. Now you're going to use what property? Zero factor property. So you're going to set each of these factors equal to 0. So x minus 8 equals 0. X plus 3 equals 0. So what are your two solutions? Yeah. So 8 and negative 3. And let's check them. Now I'm not going to check all of them every time, but let's just check this one. Remember, you always go back to the original. The original. And the reason is because you could have messed up along the way. So my original is this. So I see the variable x, I'm going to plug in 8. So I get 8 squared minus 5 times 8, and I want to see if that's going to equal 24. What's 8 squared? 5 times 8? Does that equal to 24? Yes. So then you do the same thing with negative 3. So I get negative 3 squared minus 5 times negative 3. And again, is that equal to 24? What's negative 3 squared? What's a negative times a negative? So what's 5 times 3? What's 9 plus 15? 24. Okay? All right, so we're going to do more with this. That's all this really is. So it's not a difficult section. In order to be able to do it, you got to know, first of all, how to factor. And then now you have to know the property called the zero factor property. Okay? All right. So